Born on July 30, 1863, he was the eldest of 6 children in a family of 4 boys and 2 girls. At a time when the only means of transportation were trains or horse carriages, this boy would later open a car company that would change the course of the automobile industry to what we know today. This is the story of Henry Ford. His father, William Ford, owned a farm where everyone in the family lived and worked. Henry was expected to take over the family's business. However, he was nothing like his father and was never interested in his business. At a time when farming was slow, exhausting, and manual, which is why, unsurprisingly, he came to hate it with a passion, but whereas most people at the time didn't have the fortune to escape. During his younger years, Henry lived in a village 8 miles west of Detroit, which was rapidly turning into an industrial center. Because of his exposure to steam engines early in his life, he was one of the first children to experience technology. He was able to play with the clocks of his wealthier neighbors, and by the time he was 12, he could both disassemble and reassemble them. Henry disliked going to school and did not make it past the 8th grade. He preferred to educate himself in his own time. From a young age, he was fascinated with mechanics. This fascination with machines inspired him to study every device. Henry became obsessive with mechanics when he was 13 after seeing a steam engine for the first time during a school field trip. It became his new hobby for the next few years. When he was 15, he built his first steamer, but his life took a turn soon after. In the wake of Henry's mother's death, he and his siblings were devastated. His mother's death was unexpected, and her loss devastated Henry and his siblings. He hated working on the farm as much as he missed her, because his father did not want him to leave the village until he turned 16. Henry left in search of a new direction in life. As the farm held too many memories of her beloved mother, Henry packed his things and left the village in search of a new direction in life. The city of Detroit was rapidly becoming a manufacturing center thanks to steam engines at the time. Detroit was seeking young engineers looking for work at the time. Henry decided to plunge into the world of machinery by studying everything he could. He took a job with the Michigan Car Company Works. He was fired after just 6 days on the job because he was previously unemployed. Henry found work as an apprentice at the James Flower and Brothers Machine Shop, where he was paid $2.60 per week, but it was unable to cover his rent. He therefore made the most of his previous passion. He worked part-time as a jeweler cleaning and repairing watches for $3 per week, 6 hours a day and 6 days a week. Despite being pulled in so many directions that he still had time to study and research mechanics. In 1882, when he turned 19, Henry Ford decided to return home to Michigan. Ford was fascinated by the various farm machines when he was young. He spent very little time working, instead preferring to play with them. His father had purchased a portable steam engine, which was a standard among farmers. Henry became proficient at operating it. A neighbor at his father's farm paid him $3 to operate his engine because of his skills and interest in machines. Ford's skill with machines spread across Michigan after someone from the Westinghouse Engine Company of Schenectady heard of it. He was employed by the company to install and service Westinghouse tractor engines in southern Michigan in 1885. Because of a New Year's Eve party, Henry met Clara Jane Bryant the following year and got engaged as a wedding gift. He had a New Year's party and was to receive 40 acres of land from his father. Henry did not, however, want to turn it into a farm, but rather had some other ideas. In 1891, Henry and Clara moved to a small apartment in Detroit. Around this time, Henry came across a British magazine and learned about the gas engine. This gas engine was being produced in small quantities by a German engineer called Nicholas Otto and was very different and far more efficient than steam engines. For one thing, they didn't need 30 minutes to start up, because the engine did all the combustion it needed internally. Although this new engine was fast, becoming really popular in Europe, only a few people had heard about it in America. Luckily enough for him, he found someone in the city who owned one. Henry immediately fell in love with the gas engine, but he couldn't understand how it worked, and the fact that the gas engine was powered up by an electric spark made things even worse. Knowing he had to learn more about this, Henry applied for work as a night engineer for the Edison Illuminating Company for a salary of $40 a month. Detroit at the time was powered by a steam engine producing electricity for 1,000 homes using a steam engine. Because of that, Henry was well suited for his job at the plant. When the engine broke down, he had plenty of time to tinker with it. As a result, in 1893, While the engine was idling, Henry spent a lot of time learning about electricity. Claro and Henry Ford welcomed their only child on December 12, 1893, Edson Ford Souza. Henry was promoted to chief engineer and received a weekly salary of $100 3 months later. Henry's first working gas engine was created in 1896 and was the first step in his quest for a horseless carriage. It wasn't until June 4, 1896 at 1:30 a.m. that Henry achieved his first working gas engine. He named his experimental contraption the Quadri after it was finished. A gasoline engine powered two bicycles placed side by side, making it operate. It worked well, but it had a few problems. This experimental automobile had 2 gears, and neither one was for reversing or advancing. The biggest drawback was that it didn't have a cooling system. As a result, the car overheated after driving for a while because of the lack of a cooling system. It was subsequently sold for $200 and used to fund another large undertaking. Henry subsequently made some adjustments, but the most significant one was to add a cooling system. In 1899, Henry Ford built another experimental automobile with the help of Detroit's mayor. It was heavier, sturdier, and more substantial than his previous one. A wealthy lumber merchant named William Murphy was impressed by Henry Ford's newest car one morning. After the test drive, Murphy agreed to become a part of Ford's enterprise. The Detroit Automobile Company was established on August 5, 1899 as a result of this handshake. Because of several reasons, Henry's ideas about enhancing the vehicles were not in agreement with the company's stakeholders, who were pushing him to make passenger vehicles. Because the parts were manufactured by several corporations, the company went bankrupt only a year after its inception. As a result of this, whenever a shipment was late, the whole factory had to postpone production. In addition to taking 6 months to produce his first automobile, dubbed the delivery wagon, only 20 of which were manufactured in the firm's initial 2 years, Henry's production slowed down considerably. He was fired as a result. Even though his first company did not succeed, Henry remained optimistic. It is just an opportunity to try again. Failure is simply the chance to begin again. This time, however, more carefully. When he was dismissed, Henry was actually pleased, because it diminished the strain on him. He wished to focus on auto racing as a result. He wanted to provide a platform for his cars and their quality. To begin with, racing cars had gained immense popularity in the United States. As well as despite the fact that he knew many very popular people in the city, not many of them would be willing to invest in his ideas after what happened with the Detroit Automobile Company. He wanted to showcase his cars and their quality. A year later, Ford's newly developed racing vehicle beat Alexander Winton's vehicle, as well as the nation's leading national racing driver. Henry's 26-horsepower vehicle became the talk of the town, giving investors the confidence they required to back the venture. Henry Ford created the Ford automobile firm, once again with Henry as chief engineer, not long after his position was in danger. He was producing racing cars, which infuriated his investors, who wanted him to manufacture passenger vehicles. They could be sold to the masses. Therefore, they recruited Henry Martin Leland to accomplish their objectives. Ford was upset, because they had brought in another Henry to do his bidding. Ford was annoyed. They had brought another person in to take over his position, and Henry Leland left the company in his autobiography. Henry Leland, in his autobiography, has said, "I resigned, determined never again to be put under orders," according to Henry Leland. After the creation of the Ford Motor Company, which we know as the Cadillac today, Henry Ford's investors forced him to create it. After Ford's death in 1947, the Cadillac Motor Company took over Ford Motor. Henry Ford and racing cyclist Tom Cooper, who had never previously created cars, created racing cars in 1902, producing the Ford 999, a car with an 80-horsepower engine that Barney Oldfield drove. Oldfield, a former bicycle racer who had never previously driven an automobile, broke all American speed records in 1904 while driving at a speed of 91.4 miles per hour in a new Henry Ford car. With these records and victories, he had established himself as the leading American designer of racing automobiles. Investors were behind him once again. When he was ready to start up his third company, Henry knew he would get financial aid again. Since Ford desired to produce a car that was affordable for the average person, he concentrated on creating a vehicle that was in demand. During that time, owning a car was a luxury that was only accessible to the rich. since they were created by extremely capable engineers and were strictly used for racing. Henry created a statement to his associates and investors that he would create a motor car for the masses that would be produced with the best resources by the best workers, in accordance with the most basic engineering designs conceivable, and in a price that would make it accessible to any man earning a decent wage. Ford's dream was to create an automobile that was attractive, efficient, and economical. He employed many bright young men on the design of his vehicle who shared his vision. It took Henry 20 tries before he got one that worked. He aimed the vehicle to Model A for the next 5 years, continuing to improve it. During those 5 years, the Model N was developed, but what changed? It wasn't Henry's design improvements, rather it was the production process that changed. His prior business failures had taught him the importance of having one firm produce the majority of the parts he needed to manufacture his automobiles. He discovered a machine shop in Detroit that would produce these parts one day while he was in Chicago, and that's where the assembly line concept came to life. Ford and other vehicle manufacturers assembled one vehicle at a time in the early 1900s. The procedure was slow. In other words, if he could incorporate the same idea into his cars, he would be able to produce more cars in a day. In 1904, he raised more money and established a factory. Over 300 employees were employed, and the assembly line was experimented with inside his factory. The Model N, in 1906, was the first to really utilize the assembly line. Even then, the assembly line was still in the works. However, it produced 5 times as many cars as before and became the most popular automobile in the United States. Having set his sights on bigger things, Henry created his own manufacturing company in 1905 to manufacture his own engines, transmissions, and everything else required for his automobile production. The invention of vanadium steel was a pivotal event in the development of the automobile industry, and Henry detected it at around the same time. Vanadium steel was 3 times as strong as the previous steel and much lighter. It was this metal that enabled Henry to create the Model T, one of the most successful cars in history. The Model T was manufactured by a company focused exclusively on service, so it was guaranteed that they would not be concerned about profits. The Model T was the answer to Henry Ford's desire to provide everyday automobiles for the general public. It's been a long time since the Model T was released, and the price has changed dramatically. However, it was very well liked in the United States immediately following its release. The Model T was priced at $850 when it was released, which would be around $21,000 today. Despite its high price, it was a favorite right away. The Ford Motor Company became the country's leading automobile manufacturer instantly after it was released, after receiving more than 15,000 orders in just a few days. What else could he have wanted? Henry realized that he needed a larger factory to manufacture over 100 Model Ts daily. In 1910, he built a new plant in Highland Park, Michigan. After several experiments, the assembly line was up and running in 1913. By 1914, factory work was done by the workers, rather than the workers roaming the vehicle. The vehicle was constructed by the line as it progressed down the line, step by step. As a result, production time was reduced from 12 hours to 90 minutes by 1914, producing over 300,000 cars. In 1914, half of all Model Ts were being produced, over 20,000 in 1910, and by 1916, almost 1 million were being manufactured, in addition to all of the cars on the planet. Henry had the imaginative notion that he would distinguish himself through the automobile market every year. Henry Ford raised the number of cars produced and lowered the price of the Model T to capture a larger market. To increase the quantity of cars sold, Henry Ford lowered the cost of the Model T. In 1916, he reduced the price of the Model T to less than half its previous cost of $850. But there were many other clever tactics he employed. While Ford was pioneering the automobile industry, his workers were not satisfied with his creation. Many employees found their new job in the assembly line boring because they had to perform the same function over and over again. By working for other companies, Ford's employees were able to vent their anger and leave the corporation. Henry raised their wages from $3 to $5 per day in order to keep them working for him. Many corporations thought this action would quickly put Ford out of business, but mechanics from all over the country flew to Detroit in an attempt to get higher wages. Rather than employing a few slave drivers in our multi-millionaire establishments, We believe in raising 25,000 people to a decent standard of living and contentment. Ford not only increased the wages of his mechanics, but also provided them with an hour off from the number of hours they were required to work. This allowed Ford to employ a new team of individuals for a third shift, creating a 24-hour operation. Soon after, many other automobile companies were forced to adopt the same policy across the USA as a result of Henry Ford's groundbreaking work and manufacturing advancements. According to Henry Ford, the industrialist's objective is to produce the best quality items at the lowest cost, paying the highest wages possible. Because he disliked the interference of other investors in his company, Henry Ford bought them all out in 1919. Many wealthy people in Detroit lost their money, but Henry Ford's automobile company, which he controlled exclusively, became the world's greatest as a result. Despite the fact that Henry Ford's son Edsel was president of the firm, it was really Henry who ran things. Henry paid a high price for his total control of the firm, even for the wealthiest man in America. Henry continued to believe that the Model T was the most popular car, despite the fact that other more elegant and comfortable models, such as the Chevrolet, were becoming more popular. He was so stubborn and obstinate that he refused to listen to other Ford executives or even his own son Edsel when they urged him to create a new model by the late 1920s. As a result of these declining sales numbers, Henry finally decided to shut down his Model T assembly line in the late 1920s and begin developing a new car. Henry created a new vehicle in 1927, but it was no longer produced at Highland Park, Michigan. Instead, it was produced at a larger factory on the Rogue River in Michigan, where he created a new factory to include all the steps of producing a car, from refining raw materials to putting the final piece together. Ford's one-man decision-making process no longer seemed to be the formula for success. Ford Motor Company, which in addition to making steel, glass, and other components for automobiles, was the world's largest producer of steel, glass, and other items, was no longer successful. The Ford Motor Company, which was third in the United States in 1936, even after Henry Ford's new, innovative V8 engine, fell behind Chrysler and General Motors, the two companies which dominated the market. Things only got worse for the Ford Motor Company, which was forced to lay off workers and lower its rates in 1943 following the Great Depression. Henry Ford's son died of stomach cancer in the same year. Ford Motor Company is still operating thanks to the hard work of his grandson, Henry Ford II. Ford died of a cerebral hemorrhage on April 7, 1947, at his estate after having relinquished his control of the company. Each experience we encounter makes us bigger, even when we don't realize it. We must learn that the ordeals and disappointments we encounter today help us in our future endeavors, since the world was designed to build character. As of today, Ford Motors Company has a market worth of more than $60 billion, making it one of the biggest automobile manufacturers in the world. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it.